Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, number 30 for Lance Brozdowski. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. I was jamming to this song before we came on there, so I was like a little taken aback by the birthday song. But yeah, it's the big 3-0, so I'm officially old. It's terrifying.
Sorry you had to hear the terrible singing as well, but my wife would not let me live that down if I did not sing happy birthday live.
It was good. No, that was well done. I think you're the
Yeah.
first person to sing me happy birthday today, so that means counts for something.
That makes both of our days then. Hey, Brett Pretty says happy birthday. How about this? Justin Steele, happy birthday. Lance.
I don't know what that means. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that, dude. Hope you're doing well.
Great opportunity to just go ahead and start this thing off. Happy birthday, Lance. And also, guys, go check out tomorrow. As you see, Mr. Steele is here on the live with us. Just got done interviewing Justin. We had a extremely fun conversation about all things Cubs, all things boats, all things baseball, all things podcasts. We chatted about everything, and I wish I had more knowledge of fantasy football, so I could have chatted with him about that too. But we all have our weaknesses, right?
I'm excited for that. Does he have a team in the playoffs? Do you know? Did you talk to him about that? I'm like deep in some fantasy football leagues, so we won't get into this studio. But
I was supposed to ask that question because one of the fans asked me to ask that question, and I forgot to ask.
Okay, I got to know whether he's like it's less but more sophisticated. It's amazing. Now, if you're still in here, where are you? You in the semis, Justin? What's the squad look like? Curious. Shoot in the comments.
We're gonna see what he says. I'll throw it back up on there. But you're getting a lot of happy birthdays. Brett says happy birthday. What's up, everyone from Anderson? Mike Anderson, how's it going? Says Josh Klein. What's up, everyone? So we are gonna jump into this, and we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about because, man, I mean, Lance, have you is there a 3 business days of Cubs that have been more active than what happened on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday in your Cubs career?
This has been good. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there was a deadline when they traded everybody, Brian, et cetera, was a pretty busy 24 hours, but it was in a somber way, it was kind of sad in here in the studios, but this was interesting. I mean, I was on the road for most of this. So, it was cool to react and hit back everyone in the studio and see how everybody was doing. Got bounced in the first 2 rounds. Oh, against Josh Allen. I got Allen in my league. So, all right, good luck, Justin. Sidetracked here, anyways. But no, this has been a really fun period of time, and it's just exciting. Adding Tucker is such an awesome move for the Cubs, for the fan base, for the team, for the city, etc. There's always reason to go to Wrigley Field. Now there's even more of a reason because this dude is a top 15 player in baseball easily. He projects as that. The stats say that. He had a weird injury last year, played sub 80 games, but you give me 150 of Kyle Tucker, he's easily the best player in the division, probably. I mean, Paul Skeens might be close there. I'll take that back, but he's just such a fun player. I'm really hyped to see him at Wrigley.
I am too. Before we get into it, guys, just really quickly, we are going live every single week with Lance, and I'm going to throw a little something out there. This isn't just because he has a birthday, but it helps that he has a birthday. I just threw his link to his YouTube channel in the comments. He is about 700-ish away from the 10,000 subscriber mark. So what I'm going to do here is, if we get to 10,000 subs on Lance's channel before the end of the workday on Friday, I am going to randomly pick one of the comments here, and I'm going to reach out to you, and I'm going to pay for your CubsCon ticket. Okay?
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome. I love it.
Let's get you there. We'll
try.
Dude.
It's going to be tight. I've tried. The goal is 10K by the end of the year, and I'm right on it. So
we're getting you there, dude.
So we'll see.
James Colstock says +1. He just subscribe. So once again, if we get Lance to 10,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel before the end of the workday on Friday, I'm going to pick one of these random comments and reach out to you and say, I'm paying for your CubsCon ticket. Let's see you there. Have a drink with me and Lance at the bar. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. All right, guys. With that being said, let's go ahead and set the stage. Belly is gone. Now what? So just in case you haven't already watched all of the live shows, this is the deal. Bellinger's gone. Cody Poteet is in. Cubs basically have an extra $25 million now on the books that they can use here in the 2024-2025 offseason, because $2.5 million of that money that Bellinger was owed is being paid for in this year and next year. So the current payroll, Lance, stands at $191 million, according to Fangraphs, which means that they're 50 M's away from that first threshold, which we all know is basically a real wall. It's not an invisible wall. It's a real wall for Tom Ricketts, and he pays attention to it very much. So we know that they like to go in about $10 million under to be able to work with during the season. Is that about the number that you think with Jed as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, last year was a weird year. As Megan Montemurro reported, they like just went over. It seemed almost accidentally by like 100, 200,000. And if you think of this from like a multi-year picture, my understanding is basically I mean, everyone in the city of Chicago is going to want them to be aggressive on Kyle Tucker, but in free agency, he's going to be probably around a 350 to $450 million player. You're going to have to pay probably 40 million a year. So you can't go over 3 years in a row, right? So I wonder whether there's maybe more of a buffer there relative to the 240 than we think, or whether there was just a hard cap at like 210, 220, and there's only 20 or 30 million left. I'm not entirely sure. I think that's a big question that we're not going to know the answer to until you probably get just past CubsCon and maybe all the sightings are done. But it's a really interesting question. I'm not entirely sure where that threshold is. I would bet it's lower than 230, but that is not on the inside info. It's just my intuition on like how I think they're operating. And the fact that a lot of the market, a lot of the ways they're trying to improve this team is through trade. You know, like they saved some money by shipping Bellinger and adding Tucker. The difference in value there is about like $10 million, I think, for this coming season. So
Yeah.
I don't think they're just going to go out and go, here's $34 million a year for Corbin Burns. I'd love to be proven wrong. I just don't really see that happening. I know there's been some weird accounts saying that they're in on it, blah, blah, blah. My bet is that they probably go back through trades to maybe pick up another starting pitcher. And then I'd love to see him get a guy like Tanner Scott. I think that would really kind of rev up this team. They need a lefty in the pen. That dude is really fun. He's a nemesis versus left-handed pitchers, or excuse me, left-handed hitters. He's got some really funky traits in terms of his release characteristics. He gets down the mound really well, verts his fastball. It's just a really odd combination, even if the walk rate's high. He's just such a weird look that I think he'd be really fun in leverage. Mix and match him with like Porter Hodge, left, right, would be devastating. But historically, good teams at player development, especially on the pitching side, I don't think throw out $15 million a year contracts to relievers. You don't see it often. So my bet is that if you like made me guess what they're going to do rest of the whatever's going on here, I think Hobie Milner is probably a very good candidate. I bet that's down to maybe 2 to 4 teams, and I would be stunned if the Cubs are not one of those 2 to 4 teams. So like he's probably under 5 mil. I like him. I think that'd be a good lefty option. Yates is fun too. Older, really good last year. Obviously some variance there because of the age. And then the Luzardo trade's probably the biggest. I don't really know. Like if they get that done, I think that's really attractive. From the Marlins angle, though, the thing I've been thinking about, they turned over a lot of staff. They have an entirely new pitching department. That guy's got 2 years of control. He's coming off injury. If there was a time to trade Luzardo, in my opinion, if you trust that new staff coming in, Dan Moskos, assistant pitching coach of the Cubs, now the pitching coach there. Bill Hiesel from Driveline, formerly the Angels, now their director of pitching. Got a lot of new, fresh minds in there. From my perspective, if I was the Marlins, I would hold Luzardo, pitch him through the deadline, make some changes and show that he's 22, 23, and you can probably return what they're being offered right now if you could prove health and jump his performance. So I know Morosi and some others have talked about Luzardo potentially going to the Cubs, and I would like that. I think that'd be an interesting move. It's an upside move. Obviously, he's been hurt, but the more I think about it, I'm not entirely sure it makes sense from the Marlins perspective. Yeah. Unless they really line up on a guy they like, I'd be interested to see if they grab back a pitcher because of how much Moskos knows about the Cubs organization. But I just struggle. Like the more I think about it, maybe it's one of those things where I've had too much time to think about it. I'm now wondering whether it's not going to happen, but I would love him on the squad. I think it'd be great.
I think all Cubs fans are kind of on the same point here. It's like if it means Owen Casey, it's not a good deal. And
I think I agree. I think I agree.
Jesse Rogers tweeted the other day saying like he highly doubts that Owen Casey is really a legitimate option there. So, but then like I hear a lot of people talk about, okay, well, you know, James Triantos and Javier Assad, and I'm like, why do we undervalue Javier Assad so much? Like
he's a
the
tough
guy,
one. Yeah.
He doesn't have the stuff, but man, he has shown in the last 2 years. He dipped down the second half of last year, no doubt. But in 2023, you'd be hard pressed to say that he wasn't one of the most valuable pitchers on the team just because of the role that he played and being able to go in and throw 2-3 innings and then 3 days later make a 5 to 7 inning start and shut down the opposition. He had like a 3 ERA in 23, and until 2024 when he started to fall on some hard times, he was an ERA leader for a very long part of the season. Leader meaning like top 5 in the NL. So I find that, like, personally, I think Javier Assad has more legitimate, predictable value on this team right now than Luzardo would have. His ceiling is extremely higher. I'm not going to sit here and say Luzardo is not a better pitcher than Javier Assad, but in terms of predictability and availability and where they can fit in, Javier Assad to me is like, I don't want him being a part of that deal.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with it. I mean, this is countering your point, but like, he's a tough one, man. Like, the ERA has been really good over the last couple of years. He's a data guy. He's a really interesting kind of data conundrum where you have ERA and you have FIP, or fielder independent pitching. Most of the time when you look at FIP, it predicts future year ERA better than ERA itself. So if you were to say bet on one of these two numbers predicting the guy's next year ERA, FIP's going to do a better job of that on average. The problem is, like, the more you accumulate innings, peripheral things like stuff, etc., tend to matter kind of less, in my opinion. It's just you have to find where that sample point is, where you get more confident in maybe result-based metrics as opposed to some of the underlying stuff. So I wonder whether other organizations looking at him from a model perspective just don't like him. In which case, the Cubs are just kind of going to hold him until, like, potentially there's some regression there. And we saw that at the second half of last year. He's a really weird case where, like, he's performing a full run better than his FIP. And that is, like, one of the largest differences in baseball over the last couple seasons. So from a data side, I'm just going to bet on the underlying things coming back to kind of bite him. And he's maybe more like a league average pitcher than he has. He's pitched a full run better than that, you know? So I don't know. I'm really torn on him. I think I'd be okay giving him up. If it was Assad and Triantos for Luzardo, I think I'd take it. That's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm on a different side of it. Is just like availability is the biggest ability to me. And
it's a fair point. Yeah.
He's had one healthy season and he was really legit. And I know your tweet the other day was something to the effect of like, hey, the Cubs pitching development sees something that they can probably like take to that next level, which is a big thing in baseball.
You know, I don't think they would make the move unless they had a plan. That's obvious. But I struggle a little with like the Marlins again. Like, I wonder whether they have too many sharp people there now. They're looking at Luzardo and going, yeah, this is an easy adjustment here. And like all of a sudden you get him back. You know, maybe only throw like 130, 140 innings. But again, you got 2 years on him. You can get 130 out of him this year. And then like after the 2026 season, I was looking the other day, Hap, Suzuki, I think Horner's like a bunch of guys that are up. So like that team's going to look very different in 27. So you slot Luzardo in terms of the timeline, it looks really good. So I have more confidence that you can get back to Luzardo 22, 23, where he's like a low threes ERA guy. And it'd be weird to have 4 lefties in the rotation.
It would be weird, but I'm okay with it if they're good.
I'm kind of okay with it. I just want good pitchers, and they're all distinct enough from one another where it's not like you have, you know, Steele was just commenting in here. It's not like you have 4 lefty Steels where it's all this kind of cut 4-seam fastball shape. Like that would be kind of weird. I wonder if that would take away from one another. Like Shota's vert fastball low slot, Steele cuts it. Boyd is like a low slot lefty. Luzardo's like a power lefty. Like very different pitchers. So I think it wouldn't cause too much issue in terms of like bleed from one guy to the other, lineups getting comfortable, etc. So that's just my take on it.
I think it's a much better approach than that couple of years where it was just like soft tossing finesse righties, you know?
Yeah.
Like
it's a great point. It's a great point.
Hey, really quick here. Let's reset the room because we got about double/triple the amount of when I went ahead and gave this, this little, whatever you want to call it, giveaway or contest, I guess you can say. Go subscribe to Lance on his YouTube channel. It's in the comments. You can just scroll up and click on that. If he gets to 10,000 subscribers by the end of Friday, he's only 700 away right now, then I am going to find a random comment in this live, and I'm going to reach out to you, and I'm going to say, I'm paying for your CubsCon ticket. Okay. That's what we're doing for Lance on his 30th birthday here today. So happy birthday to Lance. Let's get to some questions here in a bit, guys. Make sure you are posting your questions right now. Do it, because we are going to start asking them to Lance. One question that I have a lot of questions, but I do know that you're a big pitching guy. So Cody Petit, what do we know about Cody Petit? What do we know? Do we even want to spend any time talking about Cody Petit, or do you even think he's going to be on the major league roster?
I think he'll be on the major league roster, but he's got options. Like maybe they kick him down based on what happens elsewhere. But I mean, he's going to pitch in the majors at some point this year. He has in each of the seasons he's been healthy over the last couple of years. He's 30 years old. Like I think he's a byproduct of the fact that the Cubs didn't want to send back a bunch of money. This has been called a salary dump. I totally get it. If they wanted to send $15 million, maybe they could have gotten Will Warren, who's a very interesting pitching prospect for the Yankees that I like a bit. Didn't debut strong last year, but he's a younger guy. There's upside there. He's kind of like a Michael King type to me. Maybe doesn't actualize that much upside, but he's in that sphere of kind of pitcher. Petit is a bit different. Petit's like just been hammered with injuries. Went down with TJ, and then last year ended up with a triceps injury. It's tough to develop guys and have them like really blossom if they're running into these injuries. And I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone in the Yankees org about him, but the thing that's really obvious to me in looking at like his plot. So he's a two fastball guy. He throws four seam and sink with a changeup. Then he's got curveball sweeper. So it's 5 pitches. I bet the Cubs expand it out to 6 and give him what you'd call like a bridge slider, kind of cuttery pitch that's between. So like if you look at how his pitches move, it's like sweeper curveball over here, and then it's like four seam sinker change up here. And you see like there's nothing in the middle there, right? So the common thing we're starting to see is like you saw some Michael King, et cetera. You put a pitch in the middle, throw it like 86 to 88. It's kind of just a pitch that helps against lefties. You can maybe throw it against righties, but it's primarily to help with oppo-handed guys. Throw it like down in for swing miss. If he's got the command, he could probably strike it too. But this like bridge slider concept is becoming pretty popular in the pitch design space. I think he's an easy candidate for that based on how King doesn't throw super hard, but I bet that pitch would kind of help stitch the lefty approach together. I like his changeup. The sweeper's strong. It's probably his best pitch. The fastballs aren't great, so like you have to kind of get there on 2 of them. And I find it interesting that he throws both to each handedness. It's not like sinker to righties, forcing to lefties. It's like 20% or more to either. So I think that's how you protect a bad fastball, is just to throw a second fastball, go to multiple locations with it. So I'm not expecting this guy to like be the 3 in the rotation all of a sudden. Am I expecting to be a totally serviceable 5 if he's healthy? Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Okay.
Does he end up? Is he on the opening day roster? Did he go to Japan? I don't entirely know. Like, I'm curious to see if he had a full healthy offseason after this triceps injury and stuff, and where he's at, body wise, etc. There's some variance there. Does he pitch innings in 2025 for the Cubs? Yes. Does he have an impact? Yeah, but marginal. Is there a chance you don't really see him a lot because he's just a AAA? Also, yes. It's a tough one. Again, it's hard to analyze this in a vacuum too, because they pick up Luzardo in another arm. Like, there may just not be room for him, and he gets optioned down. So I guess we'll kind of see. I'm curious to see where he lands for 2025.
Maybe he's the 2022 version of Adrian Sampson and just surprises everyone and keeps going out there throwing 5 innings every single start and has a low 3 ERA. that would be
could be.
That's in
the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
That'd be lovely. That'd be the best outcome.
What do you think? And we've got a lot of questions coming through, so I want to get to a couple more points, and then I just want to start asking these questions because that's why people are going live here. What do you think the chances are that Nico gets traded now that the Cubs have traded both Isak and Bellinger?
I think the chance is still relatively low. Relatively low means 20 to 30%, not 0 and not 50. Is
that where you were at before? Did you think it was about 20 to 30% before?
I think it was kind of in that window. Yeah, I always thought for some reason that he would be on the team, and I don't know if this is just a byproduct of the injury and stuff, and like what the medicals look like. We don't really know. Is he projecting to be ready for Japan's in early, late March and early April? Like, don't really know. I think it's really hard to trade a guy like that if he is. And I think to some extent he makes some sense on this team. He's a bottom of the order hitter. He's going to play great defense at second base. I think he becomes more dispensable if you pick up another lefty. You get a lot of ball and play to the left side of the infield. Then you put more pressure on like a Matt Shaw, Gage Workman combo at third alongside Swanson. That becomes more important than, say, Nico's defense at second, because you're not facing as many left-handed hitters. Most likely, a lot of teams are probably going to try to stack righties against most of the rotation, which I guess you can only do so much if you have good left-handed hitters. You can't sit them for 3 days in a row. But yeah, my lean is that he's on the team come 2025. But I'd be curious again on the monetary side. Did the savings from Bellinger to Tucker open up the possibility to pay a guy like Luis Castillo and be in on that? Like they were dropped as one of like the 5 or 6 teams that maybe inquired. He's owed, I think, 20-ish million, whereas Luzardo's only like 5 to 6 or 7, depending on what his ARB settlement comes down at. That's a big difference, right? So this goes back to our points. Like in theory, you have 40, $50 million to spend.
Right.
In practice, are they actually going to spend 40 to $50 million? If they are, then Castillo makes a lot of sense, I think.
You
And
want to hear
Tanner Scott
my
makes sense, But otherwise, I'm not entirely sure.
tinfoil
Of
hat
course.
theory?
Oh yeah, tinfoil hat theory is my favorite.
Ready for this? So Nico's going to get traded.
Okay.
It's going to bring in another 11 million that's available. The reason that we haven't been hearing many rumors about one of the biggest free agent signings for this offseason, Alex Bregman, is because Jed told Boris, do not wait or do not sign Bregman until I trade Cody, and then I will be coming in with an offer. Because then you put Bregman at third, and then you just move Matt Shaw to second.
Yeah.
And listen, we have so many infielders that are ready to play Major League Baseball right now. You have Triantos, you have Shaw, you have Luis Vazquez. Who cares if none of them produce like Nico if you have Alex Bregman at third base? That's all I have to say about that. I don't think it's true. But then again, I almost said to you, and this is why I'm not holding back this time. Last week on the live, when we got Gage Workman and still hadn't quite gotten the Tucker deal done, I almost said to you, do you think that they just got a third baseman in the Rule 5 draft because they're going to ship off Isak Paredes any moment now for Kyle Tucker? So I'm not holding back on these tinfoil hats.
No, I dig it. That would have been a great call, right? Like that seems to make a ton of sense in retrospect as well. It was also interesting in Horace presser yesterday. He said that I think he said, I might be misquoting him here. I apologize if I am. I thought he said right after they traded for Isak that he talked to Dana Brown or someone and knew that they were in on him. So like he had intel back at the deadline that he would have been a shoppable player, so to speak. So that's interesting to me from the perspective of like this thing's been building probably for a while. It doesn't sound like they actually talked Tucker until the GM meetings, as Hoyer said yesterday, but he knew, right? He knew that Isak could be some kind of piece to trade. And I think you're reading the tea leaves perhaps better than some others did in terms of Workman. So yeah, that ended up being great call.
There's so much more I could ask, but that's not the point of this live. The point of this live is to let the fans ask their questions, and there are a lot. Rudy Nardini says, any chance they pivot to Cease instead? Padres need to cut payroll, and Cease or Arise are their only options.
It's an interesting one. I don't know Cease's contract off the top of my head. If you could peek that, I'd be curious to see what he's owed this year. He's probably got a couple more years of control too. I think he's probably going to be high teens or maybe 20s. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but
he's at 13 million.
13 million. He'll probably arb up to like 17 to 18ish. I got to see what his ARB projection is. Yes, but again, I think that the most interesting one that's been rumored the most is Luzardo because he's cheap, and I don't know if the Cubs want like Cease is going to cost a bit. So if like the Orioles want him, they could get him probably for like Kobe Mayo and some of these other guys they have surplus on. The question is whether the Cubs are willing to give up more than Triantos. Like I think Triantos could get Luzardo, Triantos plus could get Luzardo. I don't think Triantos can get Cease. Like that's going to be a Casey style move or a Kevin Alcantara move. Is Cease 2 years of control? What is he?
He is going to be an free agent in 26, so just 1 year.
Just 1 year. So yeah, it's even tougher. He's a really good pitcher. You obviously can project him much more aggressive than you can Luzardo. I'm going to say no that they pivot to Cease. I think it's Luzardo, maybe peripheral Castillo. If neither of those guys, then I'm not sure. I don't know if there's anyone else they're going to go after. Like I'm kind of betting perhaps that this threshold for them to spend money is a little bit lower than the full luxury tax amount. Again, no intel there. It's just kind of like how I think they might operate.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then I don't think any of these like kind of more pipe dream Castillo style, close to $20 million guys are going to fit.
Okay. Dingers says, would Kyle Finnegan be a good fit?
Yeah, I love Kyle Finnegan. Yeah. I like him a lot. That was a terrible DFA in my opinion by the Nationals. There's some easy adjustments there I think you can make with that guy. Splitter's really good, figuring the fastball usage down. I think the Nationals are maybe just not super on the forefront of a lot of things. So there's teams that could take advantage of guys like this. I think he's projected for like 6 to 8 million. So like maybe that's a little aggressive. I think Yates is probably in that same tier. So if you're the Cubs looking at it, you're probably just going to go with Yates there, who has some more closing experience, veteran leadership in the pen, relatively young pen. You know what I mean? So like I love Finnegan. I would love like a Finnegan Milner combo if you can't get Yates, but I'd say it's probably more likely that it's Yates Milner and then another piece of some kind. And I'll say that I'll say it's Luzardo. So I'd say those are the three moves left. You want me to like put it hard? Luzardo, they trade for Luzardo, they go Milner, and they pick up Yates. That's the trio, and then
I
that's your
like
opening
it.
your roster.
Okay. Chris Ralden says, could the Cubs make a trade for Alec Boehm? I kind of think that the Phillies have already shown they're asking way too much for a lot of prospects,
Yeah,
including Alec Boehm. So like, I don't see it happening. What about you?
I don't think it's happening there.
No.
He's a tough piece to move. I think. Like I don't think he grades as the best third base defender, right? But he's like kind of more average. And like he's a big body dude. He's not fast. Like I bet he slows down and doesn't play a great third defensively. You can correct me if I'm wrong on his defense acumen. Unfortunately, I don't have my laptop next to me today, so I would be looking this up
I don't
myself.
think he
But
was a good defender.
yeah, so like I struggle with him. Like you're just talking about another guy that's eventually gonna move to first base, and I feel like this team like Workman is a plus, is going to be like a plus third base defender. Like I don't know if
Oh,
people
okay.
realize that. Like this dude was like a
I didn't know
plus
that.
shortstop. Like and he's huge. Like I think everyone's going to be kind of awed by his defense. The problem is more on the hitting side of like swings and misses a lot. Contact ability isn't great. He's been developing his swing. He stopped switch hitting. So like maybe Justin Stone and the hitting department could come up with some tweaks there and get more ball in play as opposed to the 35% striker rate we'll probably see with Workman. But like he's going to be fun defensively. So that to me feels like almost like the Shaw hedge, where it's like Shaw's the better bat. We'll see how the third base defense looks. Workman is like the maybe the late game sub in if Shaw's struggling early or something along those lines. If
I was
they're up, for
completely wrong.
example.
Alec Boehm is a 5 outs above average third
Really?
baseman. Yeah.
Okay,
His
so maybe
arm
I'm
strength.
underselling him a bit.
Yeah. Arm strength is not good, but in
Okay.
the 87th percentile for third baseman for outs above average. So
I just to your point though, I just think he's going to cost too much. Like I think the offense is good. Like Zips just put out a projection on Fangraphs where they teased it. Dan Zimborski did, I think, on X and Blue Sky and stuff. And like the projection on the team looks fantastic. Like they're super balanced. Everyone there is between like 3 and 5 WAR. I don't necessarily think you need like a massive upgrade at third base. Like I think Shaw and Workman is more than serviceable third base platoon, so to speak. So that's kind of my lean right now.
I don't
I
know,
like
man.
this.
Like I look at this lineup and I just feel like there's a bat missing. I made a
I
lineup,
get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like Michael Bush, your cleanup, and that's only if you have Tucker batting second, right? If Tucker's batting third, then Seiya's batting fourth. But then either way, you either have a like number 2 hitter or an number 4 hitter. Like it just feels like something's missing there. And here's the thing, though, like if Matt Shaw comes in and lights the world on fire, I was really shocked to see the Fangraphs projected WAR for him. Like they
Yep.
really think highly of him too. But if he comes in and smashes, if suddenly PCA cuts down on the strikeouts, and maybe now he's the leadoff guy and Hap goes into the 4th spot, like it gets a little more dangerous. But I don't know. This lineup is one injury away from being like, oh, we really need that guy back. And I feel like that's not a good position to be in. I would like to see one more guy. But then again, Casey, I mean, you can call him up if there's an injury, and there's a lot of excitement around him too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the problem here is like you look at the Zips projection, and for the guys 5 through 8 in this lineup here, these 4 hitters, most of their WAR projection, like their wins above replacement, is probably coming from defense with the
For
absence of
sure.
Shaw, probably. But like Swanson wasn't a good hitter last year. Nico is not going to be 20% above average. PCA, I'm encouraged by, but that again, he's a defensive player. Like that's where he drives his value from. So you got a really good top 4, in my opinion, and
Yeah.
then you have kind of like a lot of defensive guys that drive value. And I don't know if like I defensive pitching can win ball games. Totally get it, but I think if you start to like you want to get aggressive here and start to project ahead to like NLDS, NLCS matchups, like that, the bottom of that lineup is going to get trounced by some better pitching in
Yeah.
this league. I think, unfortunately,
Yeah.
I would say like I don't want to say we were talking on our live show yesterday when Bellinger got traded, Bruce Levine and I and Marquis here, and I was like, okay, or someone brought it up, I don't think it was me, said, does the offense for the Cubs revolve around what Dansby Swanson's offensive production is? And when you put up at the time I said no, but then when you put up that lineup, if Swanson is like a 120 WRC plus guy, like 20% above the average hitter, which he hasn't been in a bit, like that becomes a much more interesting lineup.
Yeah.
So like I think you can maybe play with his projection. Like if he's the guy that gets back to what he's been doing, then I think I'm like much more encouraged by the bottom half of that order. If he's not, then what you're betting on is like PCA making another leap offensively, and then he becomes the six hitter maybe. Like you need one of those guys has got to hit. I would say I'm encouraged by Shaw. I think I'm definitely bullish on him. But we've seen a lot of these guys come up early and struggle. So like if
Yeah.
it's a tough April May for Shaw, like I don't think I'd be shocked. Like that's going to be something more where it's like he warms as the season goes, and then maybe caps off a really strong year. And then next year we're talking about Mal. Imagine if Shaw could just put together a full season that he did in July through September. Look at that chunk. He was 15% above the average hitter, and then in April May it was like he was 20% below. Like I
Yeah.
just the gap between AAA and Major League pitching is big.
It's huge.
So
It's
I,
huge.
I
Yeah.
I worry a little bit about Shaw early, but I think late he could be really productive.
Well, and this, what you just said right here, realizing, okay, if Dansby has a good offensive season, well, what if he doesn't have a good offensive season?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're still batting him fifth or somewhere in the top five. That's why I really liked the lineup with Bellinger, was because it's kind of like getting a good closer. It just, everyone steps down to a lower leverage role. Well, you get another good bat and everyone slots down one more spot. And so as long as, and I think I speak for all fans, as long as Jed goes out and uses the money that's now freed up to go get another nice few pieces, maybe another big superstar, then it's like, okay, good. But if he doesn't, it's like, what? That was the bat that made this lineup long. I digress because there's a lot of fan questions. I just wanted to get that point in there.
I get you.
Let's get, I'm going to have to be specific about a little particular about who I pick for questions here, because we are going to have a hard cutoff at the 15 mark of the hour. Josh Klein, have the rumors of Kirby, Miller, and Gilbert possibly available died down now?
Yeah, because the prices there are insane from my understanding. Yeah. Those guys have a lot of control. They are very good pitchers. Miller's got like 4 or 5 years of control. Kirby's got 4. I think Gilbert has 3 off the top of my head. Like those guys, like that is who you give up like a Crochet style package for. Like I don't even know if a Crochet package would get one of those guys because of the years of control. Like Crochet is one of my favorite pitchers in baseball, and I long for the day that we find out they made a really good offer and they just like the Red Sox offer better, because I thought that made a ton of sense in Chicago to grab him. But these guys, yeah, they're dying because the prices are insane and no one wants to pay them. I think that's a very simple answer. Yeah.
Ryan Williams, how many relievers do you think the Cubs will add? I think Scott, Yates, and Leclerc are all very nice fits.
Yeah, I think it's 1 to 2. I'll say 2. I'll go Milner, Yates. I agree on Scott. I just worry on the money side. I think Leclerc is another one that a lot of people are in on, where like he's a good pitcher. I wouldn't say he's a Scott replacement, but his kind of slider works versus left-handed hitters. And he has a similar profile in terms of how much he walks guys. He's not in zone a ton, but he's good. I wouldn't say he's like a closer. Like it seems like anytime he's gotten into that role, he struggled a bit. He's run into some injuries. So I'll go Milner and Yates, just because Milner's the guy like that. It was cheaper out of that crop. And again, like if we think they have some hard cap below 240, say it's like 220 or whatever, it's going to be tough to fit Scott in at 15 and some other guys.
I love it. Hunt Tough says, who won the Bellinger trade? I mean,
the Yankees won the Bellinger trade, but
yeah,
it's in the context of the Cubs in terms of needing to cut money, then like they probably still want it. But I mean, you got to think of it in context. But straight up trade, of course, you make that trade like MLB The Show. The game's rejecting you. It's like, but monetary decisions got to matter a lot in terms of team construction.
I like this question from Dingers. Joe from Obvious Shirts posted a pretty good fencing post about why to move Nico to third base. I don't think it's going to happen. But Dinger says, any chance the Cubs try to move Nico to third base and Shaw can play second? Did you see that post before?
I think I missed it, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
What Joe basically said is, when balls get by a third baseman, it basically equals more runs. When balls get by a second baseman, it typically just means more base runners. That was the short version of it. And I didn't disagree. I just, I just wonder if just like the Bush thing, why fix what's not broken, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, they've been grooming Shaw at third too. Like I don't know Horner's arm strength off the top of my head. I would bet Shaw's is slightly better. This is the old idea. Like there were some ideas of like floating Bush to second or third. I think Bush had like one of the lowest arm strengths in baseball last year. Like nothing wrong with that. Like he's a great first baseman, but like you can't put him at third base. Like that's insane, So like Yeah, I guess like what are you achieving by putting Nico to third? You're getting like marginally better defense. Like I think I just want to see what Shaw can do at third base. Like they've been a lot of the times I feel like we hype these guys up at certain positions, but just because of the raw uncertainty of it, we're like, no, let's just move someone else there. It's a little bit safer. It's like, man, if Shaw's an average third baseman with what we expect his bat to be, that's the third baseman of the Cubs for the next 3, 4 years. So I don't understand why we can't just give it a month or two. Let's
Yeah.
see how he looks at third base. So we'll see.
Ryan Rich says, please describe Tommy Hotovy's influence and impact on the pitching staff. I will also say, Lance, to relieve you of having to answer this too in depth, I did ask this to Justin Steele as well, and we're going to be
Cool.
posting the answer on that. We're going to do an excerpt from the Justin Steele interview tomorrow, where he's mainly focusing on the 2024-2025 editions so far. I just wanted to get his reaction to those, but then we talk about a lot of stuff beyond that, and this was one of those things. So just really quickly, from what you know of the players, to answer this question from Ryan.
I'll keep it tight. Yeah, I think he's a really good distiller of information. From my understanding, when Moskos was there and some others, on the R&D side, front office, you're getting really nerdy on stuff. And Hottovy's like I won't say he's a simple person, but like he does a really good job, from my understanding, of reducing information down. And that's like really think the purpose at the end of the day of a pitching coach. A lot of these guys that I've talked to, I've had some conversations with a few this offseason that I was like really looking forward to. And I wouldn't say I'm ever like totally impressed by them, which is maybe really selfish of me to like cocky of me to say, but I love talking to the nerds, thinking about these galaxy brain thoughts on like how you get guys in the zone more, and like tell me about like this orientation versus that orientation in terms of its influence on like seam effects on the ball. And it's like I've run into situations where a lot of pitching coaches are like, Lance, you're just making things way too complex. I won't say I've run into this with Hottovy specifically, but like I get this a lot from people. And it's like I think that one of the key ways to be a good pitching coach is you got to be able to distill this info down. You're one of the first lines to the player.
Yeah.
Like most of these players do not care about this orientation giving them an extra 2 inches of vert, 4 inches of sweep. Like they just want to get better. They just like want to know how to get better. And I think Hottovy does a good job of that.
Keep it simple, stupid. Justin Steele, speaking of which, he says, what's Lance doing the rest of the offseason if he's the GM? You've already talked about it a little bit, but was there any move that you didn't discuss that you would do if you were Jed?
No, my question would be, what is my budget? Right. That would solve a lot of these. If I could go to 240, like give me Tanner Scott. Like I think that guy makes this team demonstrably better. So I'd go Tanner Scott and I'd trade for Luzardo. I think that would make this team like gotta be top 5-ish favorite for the pennant. I mean, that might even be. I mean, the Mets and the Dodgers are going to be really tough to overcome from a projection standpoint. But like that Mets staff is not really fleshed out totally yet. They're adding a lot of pieces. Like prior to that Montas signing and the Clay Holmes conversion, they're like Senga and Blackburn and Peterson. And I'm like, the Cubs rotation is better than that. Like, Cubs rotation runs laps around that rotation. So I think Luzardo as a flyer would really make a lot of sense for this team. I trust what they do internally on the pitching side. And I think they could get that guy healthy. And over the next 2 seasons, I think he could be a really good power lefty that complements the rest of the lefties in the rotation. And Scott is just like, I mean, that guy's like one of the more unique relievers in baseball. I mentioned it earlier, but he'd be so fun in that pen, man. He'd be able to match up with Hodge. He'd be like your leverage chip. Like you watch the World Series, you watch all these other postseason games. Like watch how the Dodgers like match up some of these guys. Like they have really good pen options, left, right. They have righties that work versus lefties, lefties that work versus righties, and they play chess with you. They do not let you see some of the relievers. They push against that idea of seeing them multiple times. And they did this with their lineup too, the Dodgers. They flip around a lot of their order to not have a situation where they run into needing a reliever in a certain spot because they got multiple options. And I really think Scott gives this team like some really fun leverage late in games of like playing around with pockets of lefties and like just absolutely dominating them. So that's my angle. That would be what I would do.
I really hope Luke Little is healthy and dialed in this year, but I am legitimately tired of going into the season with no dominant lefty out of the bullpen. This would be the third straight year where it's like, okay, we either don't have a guy or we think that this guy is going to be the guy and then he gets hurt. And then it's like, okay, we're back to the whole, like, let's throw a bunch of splitters at guys and just pretend like they're a lefty.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. And I do think there's some merit to that. Like a lot of the teams agree with that and use guys like Leiter, et cetera. But I just think Scott's such a game changer for this pen.
For sure. Michael King has 1 year left, says Randy Leeson. Would he be of interest to the Cubs? I don't think they're shopping Michael King.
I don't know. I love Michael King. I think he's a great pitcher. He's actually one of my favorite conversations. Most of the time I like hop over to the visitors clubhouse at Wrigley if I get some time and just talk to whatever team's in. Against my only chance to like talk to non-Cubs players and stuff. And King was my favorite conversation this year.
That's
Really,
cool.
really cerebral guy. I wrote about it. I just really enjoyed his thoughts on pitching, and he's nasty too. He's also got this weird thing where his velo ticks up every year, and we were talking about that, and he's like, "Bro, I have no idea. It's just like I can't bucket. I just like come into the season and I'm just not as hot. Nothing changes. They don't see anything in the biomech that shows me I'm lower. And if you look at his like velo trends, it's always like whoop, as he goes into the year. Um, but the pitching class, I did take. I know I'm talking away.
You're good.
Next year's pitching class is
Yeah.
pretty strong. I think it's like Framber Valdez. There's a couple guys in there that are like tooled up. So like it's there's going to be a lot of good pitching. I'd be really curious to see who the Cubs maybe go after and target. We haven't historically seen them push towards the top end of that market, but if you could reset under the luxury tax this year and you want to give a big contract to Tucker, I think it'd be really cool to add one of these other 22 to 25 million dollar arms that could really really complement the staff.
It would be fun. It would be really fun. By the way,
Yeah.
Michael King, when I was watching during the playoffs, I was getting tons of Jake Arrieta vibes. Like,
Yeah, he's got that crossfire. Yeah,
crossfire with that ball that the two-seamer that just runs back. Dirty slider for sure. Jacob Summer says, I like petite Kirby Yates would be a lot nicer to have than Finnegan. What are we giving up for Luzardo? We kind of already talked about that, but I mean, you know, I think the long story short of it is it's probably going to take a top prospect and then a major league ready arm is what you're kind of saying, right?
Yeah, I know that plan there in Miami's probably like 3 to 5 years. So like maybe you could get away with some other minor leaguer, but the Cubs don't really have a lot of expendable minor league pitching right now.
Yeah.
So like I'm not entirely sure who the Marlins guys would be looking at and going, yeah, we want him. Like I like Brody McCullough's stuff, but like that dude's been hurt a ton. You know, there's just not like Ferris isn't on this team anymore. There's not a lot of like young pitchers in the system that I think you could comfortably trade. But I don't know. So like I would say Triantos and Assad makes some sense. I really don't know how that stacks up potentially against other offers or the Mariners, excuse me, Marlins' willingness to ship them. So I guess we'll kind of see on that.
We have a few minutes left before I ask these final questions. I just want to, because we have double the amount of people since the last time I announced it. I just put in the comments right now, Lance's YouTube channel. Go subscribe yourself. He is very close to 10,000 subscribers. And what I am offering is if we get him to 10,000 subscribers before the weekend hits, the end of the day on Friday, then I will go back to any of these random comments. I'll pick one person and I will be buying your CubsCon ticket. Come have a drink with Lance and I at the bar at the Sheraton in at Riverwalk at CubsCon. All right. Let's do this with the last.
We can go a little longer too. Let's go to like another 10. I know I said the 15 mark, but let's go to 20. Let's get some other questions in.
Okay, well, let's see if we can do that. We've I've got at least 3 listed here. So if you got any more questions, post them right now. Adrian says, do they bring in arms like Lopez, bring back arms like Lopez, Almonte, guys like that for some depth? I'm surprised they haven't re-signed Alzolay to a minor league deal by now.
Yeah. I wonder what that market's shaping up to be. I would say no. I'm not entirely sure. Like Almonte's been hurt, I think, a bit too much. I like Lopez too, and like he had some connection there at Council, so perhaps it's a good question. Like I do think what happens on the reliever side a lot is like there's this massive pool of guys, and then differentiating between them from a dollar standpoint and projection standpoint, like what you could change to make this guy better really gets kind of hairy to some extent, you know? Where it's like, what's really the difference between the Lopez and Almonte and a Milner, et cetera? Like it's fit. You know, like Milner, obviously some history at Council, makes sense on the team. He's going to be cheap, probably sub 3 million or so for a year. Like there's a lot of like weird variables that are going to go into this stuff. And then also, where's the guy want to play? You know, like if he doesn't want to play with the Cubs anymore, then like there's probably another team that's willing to pay one of these smaller dollar relievers a comparable amount. It's almost like the leverage goes back on the player. You know, like everyone's always looking for depth relievers if they have open 40-man spots and stuff. It's like, yeah, one of these guys might get a contract or an invite or something along those lines. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it gets to the point where like a Lopez and Almonte don't have major league offers and they just need minor league offer with invite, then totally. I think that's you give as many of those out as you want, you know, especially with how early the season starts with the Cubs going over to Japan. But I wouldn't say these 2 guys I think are at the forefront of my mind. I'm more thinking I think they are too around Yates and Milner and some of these other guys and whether they could fit in.
Okay. Tane, I think. What happens to Canario?
That's a great question.
It's a really good question. I mean, when it was the deadline for non-tendering, I thought for sure he was getting non-tendered. Like I didn't. He's out of options, and you have a surplus of outfielders. Where does he fit in? I don't see it.
I don't think he does. Yeah, that's the problem. And then it's another thing. I wouldn't say he's damaged goods, but it's tough where it's like you don't really know. Like you don't have leverage in that negotiation to another team. You know, it's like this is like the Luzardo thing. The Marlins have some leverage there with Canario. It's like you guys got nowhere to play him, man. Like
no,
we'll give you this bag of beans for him. Like what are you gonna do with him otherwise? You know, like we'll just wait for him to hit the waivers and then we'll claim him. Like why would we give you anything? Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure. Like. I don't know. Like, I still think that dude has like crazy light tower power. I don't entirely know. I struggle a bit with these AAA guys who just don't get major league time. You know, maybe he's a candidate to go to like the White Sox. Like that lineup is terrible. You know, like I would just gobble up all these guys. Like, who I think just need major league reps to see major league pitching for 2.5 months. Yeah. It does not matter if they put up a 60 WRC plus and they're 40% worse than league average, and see if they develop. You know, like we saw that offensively with PCA last year, and PCA is obviously like one of the best prospects in baseball, but like that matters. Like you need those major league reps to get better. Like I do not think AAA pitching, the gap between AAA pitching and the majors is larger than it's probably ever been. And I don't think that gap's shrinking. So like to get Canario to be any kind of major league player, he's got to play. He's not going to play on the Cubs roster with the current construction of it. So he's got to go. I just don't know where.
Our mutual friend Mike Hughes says bringing in Vladdy changes this lineup. What lineup doesn't get changed with Vladdy, right?
But Vladdy probably goes to first. Like Vladdy can't play third. I don't care what anybody says. So what do you do there?
He's a DH. He's a DH.
Yeah, he's a DH. Yeah. So then I guess you wait for Suzuki. Like I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I mean, sure, yeah, Vladdy'd be great.
It's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream. We can keep on dreaming. Joshua says, "Do you think the Yankees will get Pete from the Mets?"
No, I think they'll get Christian Walker. I wonder whether P takes some slighted money to go back to the Mets. I saw some reports that like his interest, the market interest on him isn't as big as maybe Boris and some other people thought. I could totally see the Mets coming in there and being like, okay, we'll give you like multiple years at 21 million or something lower, well lower than market value. But it's like he becomes a lifelong Met and like he plays with Soto and he's really fun and the fans love him. But I think Walker's maybe a little bit better of a fit for the Yankees, and I've heard that name bubbled a couple times.
Cool. Jacob says, "What do you think of Yohan Man?" Well, I have a tough
Moncada, yeah.
Oh my God, I have a tough time saying that name. Good depth at third base, second base, first base. I mean, a lot of I've heard that floated around a lot. Go get one of these like 1-year third baseman / left side of the field infielders just in case Shaw isn't ready or just in case like he struggles, yada yada yada. I don't think it's a bad idea.
I don't think it's a bad idea either, but like you're pitching this to Moncada himself, right? You're like, hey, we're signing you as a backup to Gage Workman and Matt Shaw. Like, do you think he's really going to be like, oh, that sounds like a fantastic situation? Like I would imagine he takes a couple mil less to just go somewhere where he's going to play and maybe try to reestablish value, especially if he gets like maybe a 1-and-1 player option or something like that, where you're going to opt out. We see that more on pitching side. I don't know if they'll construct it on the hitting side, but you know, he's been on a bad team. He's been hurt a ton. Like, it'd be great to see some change of scenery there. It doesn't make sense to me to sign him. I just don't really know where he fits. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking more from the perspective, you're pitching Yohan Moncada to come to the Cubs. And he's like, where's my spot? And you're like, well, you can back up everywhere. Like, I don't think that's particularly attractive for Yohan Moncada. You know, like I think he's a fine player, you know, but it's like, I just don't think he fits on this team personally.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, by the way, just a update here. Adam just asked, is Luke Little healthy? Justin Steele, man, Justin is he's just got his popcorn and he's watching and he's having a good time. He says Luke Little is throwing, can confirm. So that's awesome. Thank you, Steele. Let's see here. We've got time for one more question.
What do we got?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Let's see here. I don't know which one I want to pick, Lance. Let's go with this one. Steven, good place to stop it. What influence does council have on the roster construction?
Well, that's an interesting question. I can't say I really have too great of an answer there. I'm not entirely sure. I would imagine he has some influence. All I know is that the Cubs were like a pretty model-driven team. You see this on the draft side a lot. I would imagine that trickles over into the front office as well in terms of the decision-making there. So I wonder, like, I imagine when he was signed, there was a lot of talk about like how he's like almost an extension to some extent of the front office, you know? Like he thinks like a front office member. You know, if he stops being a manager, I wouldn't be surprised if he hops into like an AGM or GM role or special assistant or something along those lines. This is years down the road, etc. Like he's just that kind of mind, I think. Like he thinks about the game very cerebrally. And I think that lines up with how the Cubs, Carter Hawkins, Jed Hoyer, Bakari, Jared Banner, etc., think about the game. The guys in the front office, Otero, etc. So yeah, I on roster construction, I imagine he has some influence. I don't entirely know what it would be. I'm trying to think. The thing I've always been curious about on like every baseball team is like if you're very model driven, when do the instances come up when you decide that your gut or whatever you believe viscerally is more important than what the model's saying? Like, what's the difference there? Like, say you have two. Let's go with this. You have two relievers. Both of them are projected for within zero point 0.3 WAR of each other. One's for 1, one's for 0.7. You know, like is your gut enough to push that guy who's 0.7 up to the 1 or up to 1.1? That's almost like 30% above his value, you know? Like that stuff I find fascinating. And I unfortunately don't have too much of a perspective on like how it actually occurs. But I wonder whether like Council and some others have some influence in that direction. Like these guys are projected very similar. I like this guy more. I've worked with him and I think he's a good fit for the clubhouse. And like I loved using him in leverage spots. Or this guy was more, I think this guy's more conditioned to pitch on back-to-back days, etc. Like, these are probably all conditions and considerations that Council has. But I do wonder, like, comparable situations on guys, like, do you have as the coach some influence to be like, no, I get that guy's projected for more, but
Yeah.
you know, hey, I heard that he's not great in the clubhouse, or like he's tough to manage, or he hates back-to-backs, he struggles in back-to-backs, like all that stuff maybe has some implication on like what eventually gets done from an offer extension standpoint. But it's a great question.
I will say,
I'm not sure.
I will say when I talked to Boog, I asked him a similar question, and he said that he believes that Council has a very big impact
Really?
on the players that
Listen to
the
Boog
teams
over me
don't
then for
have.
sure.
Yeah, just because they basically, Boog said, hey, they hired him because they wanted another front office mind.
Yeah, that lines up with my thought. I'm definitely listening to Boog over me on that question for sure.
By the way, sad news, Adbert is a
Oh
Met.
no.
I didn't know that, Steele. And he says confirmed, and they want him to start once he's healthy again.
Oh, the Mets. See, this is so funny. I thought this was really funny when they signed Holmes too, where it's like,
Yeah.
they
Converting
need
all these guys.
so many. They need like you have the pie of 1,400 innings or whatever. You got to fill that, and like how you fill that. If you sign Soto for the amount of money they signed Soto for, you got to get really creative on the pitching side.
Yeah.
So like I love this concept of them doing all these like reliever to starter conversions. They picked up Desi Dershell from the Yankees, who's one of the best assistant pitching coaches in baseball. Super sharp dude. They have really smart people on the pitching side there. I think they're on the up and up, the Mets. And I love this experiment. I love it. They're getting so galaxy brain with it, where they were like, listen, we get Soto, we're not going to have money to go out and get Burns. So like we need 5 guys at $13 million that are all relievers that we could convert. I actually wouldn't be stunned if they go after like Hoffman or something like that and take both the guys that are like the big conversion candidates from this offseason and convert them both to starters and see what happens.
That'd be interesting. By the way, Justin Steele doesn't realize it, but he just inadvertently cornered himself into becoming the new setup man reporter and insider, because he just gave us so much insight by being in the comments here. Thank you, Steele. Guys, one more time, every single week, Lance and I are going live to answer your questions. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us. We had a really nice room here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, por favor, and make sure you are subscribed to Lance's channel as well. Just go back to the comments. You will see the comment with the link from me. Once again, if we get Lance to 10,000 subs before the end of Friday, I will buy someone their CubsCon ticket. So let's go, Lance. Thanks so much, bro. This is getting more fun every time.
Absolutely. Take care.
See you guys.